D- During the pendency of suit for recovery of immovable property, if the defendant transfer the property, the decree can be executed against the transferee. A institute a suit against B for the recovery of 2 lakh and file an application for attachments of B's property. Before the attachment, B transfer his property to C. The transfer is valid. The rule of lis pendens is applicable to the suit for a specific performance of contract to transfer of immovable property. The statement is true. What is enunciated in section 52 of the Transfer of Property Act, effect of lis pendens. For applicability of doctrine of lis pendens, the property would be immovable. Bellamy versus Sabina case is related to which doctrine? Lis pendens. The doctrine of lis pendens applies where the transfer is made during the pendency of suit. The literally meaning of lis pendens is a suit under consideration of any court of law. The doctrine of lis pendens is explained in the famous case of Bellamy versus Shabini. The rule of lis pendens applies when a suit or proceeding in which the right of immovable property is pending between two persons and one of them sell the property. During the lis pendens doctrine of lis pendens applicable during the pendency of the proceeding. Transfer of property pending suit thereto, the transfer shall be affected subject to the doctrine of order of the court. The doctrine of lis pendens is based on the principle of public policy. The doctrine of lis pendens applies where the transfer is made after the decree of trial of court but before the filing of an appeal. The principle of lis pendens embodied in section 52 of Transfer of Property Act pertain to public policy. Under the principle of sub judice, which one of the following is not an essential condition of the suit? That the previous suit is pending in the foreign court. Section 52 of Transfer of Property Act deals with lis pendens. Which one of the following is a leading case on doctrine of part performance? Muhammad Musa versus Ashok Kumar Ganguly. Part performance of a contract for sale of immovable property is contemplated under which section of the TP Act? Section 53A. Every transfer of immovable property made with intent to defeat the creditor of transfer is voidable at the option of creditor so defeated. Doctrine of part performance cannot defeat the right of a transferee for the value or without the notice of previous contract and its part performance. For application of doctrine of part performance, the agreement of transfer of any immovable property must be in writing or signed by the transferor. Lis pendens is the principle in Transfer of Property Act. Every transfer of immovable property act made without consideration with intent to defraud the subsequent transferee shall be voidable at the option of subsequent transferee. What does not constitute a part of performance? Act introduced introductory to the previous to an agreement. Section 53 of TP Act deals with part performance. In a case of transfer hit by doctrine of lis pendens, the question of good faith will essential to be established before equitable relief to be granted in the favor of subsequent vendee. Under section 41 to 51 of the Transfer of Property Act 1882, totally irrelevant. A settler made to defeat the defraud the credit and voidable under which section of the Transfer of Property Act? Section 53. Which one of the following postulate is a sine qua non is basis of the claim on Section 53 of Transfer of Property Act? Contracts would have been in writing, signed by the transfer. Transferee should have taken the possession of immovable property covered by the contract. The transferee already in the possession should have done some act in the furtherance of contract. What does Section 53 of Transfer of Property deal with? Part performance, which is not ingredient of Section 53A of Transfer of Property Act, movable property. Which one is the ingredient? Agreement for transferred consideration. Transferee has performed his part. Under Transfer of Property Act, every transfer of immovable property made with intent to defeat and delay shall be voidable. Provisions of Section 53A of Transfer of Property Act 1882. The rights of the following transferee for consideration shall be affected who has no notice of the contract. Every transfer of immovable property made with intent to defeat or delay the creditor of transferor shall be voidable at the option of such creditor. A. Enter into agreement with B to sell immovable property of the former for the consideration, and B was not in the possession of the property. Both parties had signed the agreement. The agreement had not been registered under Indian Registration Act. In a suit between the party, B claimed the benefit of Section 53 of a Transfer of Property Act. Whether the claim is maintainable? Yes, it is maintainable. To apply the doctrine of part performance laid down in Section 53 of Transfer of Property Act, the transferee must be always ready and willingly to discharge his part and obligation under the contract. A contract must be in writing and signed by transferor, and the term and condition must be certain. The contract must be in the value of gratuitous. Doctrine of part performance of the contract is provided in Transfer of Property Act 1882, Section 53A. Which one of the following statement is true? To claim the benefit of part performance, the contract should be registered. No contract of action is conferred on the transfer in the possession under unregistered contract of sale. Which section of Transfer of Property contains this principle? Section 53A. A transfer of immovable property made with the intent to defeat or delay the creditor of transferor shall be voidable at the option of any creditor so defeated or delay. For part performance of the contract, which is not an essential ingredient, transferee has paid full consideration. Prabodh Kumar Das versus Dantamara Tea Company Limited case is related to which one of the following doctrine? Doctrine of part performance. Under which section of Transfer of Property Act fraudulent transfer is defined? Section 53. In the case of part performance, what is not necessary with the transferee? Notice to transfer. Which section of TP Act is bar the fraudulent transfer? Section 53. The doctrine of part performance is based on Section 53A. Which one is not essential for the doctrine of part performance? contract must be for the movable property. Doctrine of part performance under Transfer of Property Act does not apply to oral agreement standing timber if the subject matter is the grass. Section 53 of Transfer of Property Act deal with doctrine of part performance. A transfer of immovable property made without consideration with intent to defraud a subsequent transferee is voidable at the option of such subsequent transferee. Fraudulent transfer is voidable. Fraudulent transfer is defined in Section 53 of Transfer of Property Act. Doctrine of part performance as given in Section 53A of TP Act is equitable right available in defense. The provision of fraudulent transfer is given in Section 53 of Transfer of Property Act 1882. If the owner of the property elect to dissent from transfer under Section 35 of TP Act, the disappointed transferee is entitled to compensate when the transfer is gratuitous and transferor dies before the election. The transfer is gratuitous and transferor became incapable of making of a fresh transfer before the election. The transferor is for the consideration. The leading case of the restriction repugnant to interest created is Tulk versus Mox. Which one of the following is the essential element of the principle of election? Unauthorized transfer of property, transaction, profit, gift. Under which case the principle of election does not apply. Opposite aims. Doctrine of lis pendens would apply against the defendant who has transferred the movable property from the date of filing plaint. The plaintiff seeks specific performance of oral contract and alternatively pleads benefit of Section 53A of the Transfer of Property Act, whether the alternative relief can be granted to the subject to the conditions. Which of the following is immovable property? Tree bearing fruits. Which section embodied doctrine of Cyprus? Section 26. Where a person transfer the property representing that he has a present interest therein, whereas he has in fact only a space succession of the transferee is entitled for the benefit of Section 43. If we take the transferee on the faith of that representation for the consideration of Section 43 and Section 6A operate on different field, the principle is laid down in Jama Masjid Makkara versus Kodi Manidara Deval. Which one of the following property has been not recognized by court as a immovable property? A right of worship. A has let his house at rent of rupees 100 payable on the last date of each month. A sell his house to be on the 15th of June. On 30th of June, what will be the apportionment? 50 to A and 50 to B. Under the Section 10 of Transfer of Property Act, transfer of the property with condition restraining alienation is void. Which one of the following provision of Transfer of Property Act provided that a person taking the benefit of instrument must also bear the burden? Section 35. In which one of the following cases it was held that partition is not a transfer of property? Viens Sareen versus Ajit Kumar, AIR 1986, SC 432. Under Transfer of Property Act, which one of the following is not correctly matched? Section 41, ostensible honor, correctly matched. Doctrine of part performance, Section 53B, not correctly matched. B is wrong. Fraudulent transfer, Section 53, lis pendens 52. Which one of the following condition is invalidate according to Section 10 of Transfer of Property Act 1882? A condition not to sell during the lifetime of transferor. Under Transfer of Property Act, which one of the following is not transferable? Salary of public officer after it has become payable. In case of transfer of property for the benefit of public, which of the following restrictions shall not apply? Rules against perpetuity transfer to take effect in the failure of prior interest direction of accumulation. In the light of provision of TP Act, a minor cannot transfer a property, can accept transfer of property in his favor. The term transfer under Transfer of Property Act refer to party or whole transferor, absolute or conditional transferor. In contract for sale of immovable property where buyer has already paid and purchase price, he is entitled to charge only if he has not improperly declined to accept delivery of the property. Which one of the following will be considered as transfer of property under Transfer of Property Act? Select the answer by using code given below. Exchange of two things, creation of charge of immovable property by operation of law. Match the list. Transfer in perpetuity. Transfer in perpetuity, Section 18. When unborn person acquire vested interest on the transfer of the benefit, Section 20. Transfer of ostensible owner, Section 41. Transfer by co-owner, Section 44. Not correctly matched. C. Fulfillment of conditions subsequent, Section 30. Not correctly matched. Contingent interest, 21. Direction of accumulation, 17. Priority of right created by transfer, Section 48. As A sell a house to B, directing that he cannot reside in it but can use only as a godown of soap or soap, is void. An easement is extinguished only where either the dominant or the sovereign heritage is completely destroyed, only when the same person became entitled to the absolute ownership of the whole of the dominant sovereign heritage. Speech succession, 6A. Right to re-entry, 6B. Dominant heritage, 6C. Right to sue, 6E. The Transfer of Property Act 1882 applies to the transfer of property made by the act of parties. A. By settlement deed transfer the property to B for life. Then S dies before P dies. On the death of P, the heir of S claim the property. Is the claim valid? Valid since S interest in the heritable. Whether the gift of the condition is not transfer the gifted property of legal? No. Which one of the following is a legal transfer under the provision of Transfer of Property Act? Second mortgage of the transfer of property. Whether the partition of property can be called a transfer of property? No. Which one of the following section of transfer of property contain exception to the maxim nemo det quod non habet? Section 41 and 43. Which one of the following is not correctly matched? This one, 41. Oral transfer, section 9. Rule against perpetuity, section 14. Doctrine of election, section 35. Which one of the following cases does not pertain to the document part performance? Pertinent. D1 is not pertinent. Arif versus Jadunath, प्रबोध कुमार वर्सेस धनवंतरण टी को कंपनी, सरदार गोविंद राव महादकनी वर्सेस देवी सहानी. ट्रांसफर ऑफ प्रॉपर्टी एक्ट 1882 covers movable property, immovable property. Which rules against perpetuity will not be applicable in perpetuity transfer for gift, perpetual transfer of gift, personal contract, vested interest. Transfer of Property Act 1882 has no application to transfer the property where it take place by operation of law. The doctrine of nemo dat quod non habet under Transfer of Property Act applies to section 40, section 42, section 43, 44. Which one of the following is not a transfer of transferred by the act of party under Transfer of Property Act? Succession. Who is not competent to transfer his property under Transfer of Property Act 1882? Minor. Transfer of property means transfer between living persons, transfer between living person and trust, transfer between legal person. Transfer of property includes all. Nemo det quod non habet. No man confer better title than which he is himself has. Establish the principle of rule of transfer of property. Space succession means chance of succeeding to hereditary property, chance of succeeding the property of another. Which one of the following section of Transfer of Property Act contain exception to the maxim nemo det quod non habet? Section 41 and 43. To which one of the following section 5 to 37 of Transfer of Property Act 1882 applies? Transfer of property whether movable or immovable. Transfer of X transfer rupees 5,000 to Y on condition that he shall marry with the consent of A and B, C. Y married without the consent of A, B, C, but obtained their consent after marriage. Y has not fulfilled the condition. Kuppad versus Kuppad 1874 is related to doctrine of election. A sell his house to B with condition that B cannot transfer his house to anyone except C. The sale is valid but conditionally void. Transferee of part performance has right to protect his possession right. Which one of the following statement is incorrect according to Transfer of Property Act? A transfer of property can be made where transfer will operate only after the death of transferor, where writing is not expressly required by law of transfer of property made orally. True. Rule against double possibility was recognized in which one of the following cases? Whitewell versus Missile. Ram Kumar Kudun versus MC Queen 1872 case related to ostensible honor. The principle of maxim nemo det quod non habet is incorporated in which one of the following section of TP Act? Section 41, 42, 43, 44. Provision of Transfer of Property Act shall be applicable to where the property of transferred by act of the parties. Which one of the following statement is not correct in context of transfer of property? He cannot transfer the property himself by one or more other living person. To be competent to transfer of property, it is not essential that transferable property is his own. A transfer rupees 5,000 to be paid to him on the attaining the majority on marrying with the proviso that B dies a minor or marries without C's consent. The said 500 shall go to D. B marry when only 17 years of age without C's consent. The said 500 shall go to D. The farm of Sultanpur has a property of C and worth rupees 8,000. A, by an instrument of it, professes to transfer it to B, giving the same instrument of rupees 1 lakh to C. A dies before the election. B shall be given is entitled to get 80,000 from A's representative. A, believing in good faith that he is absolutely entitled thereto, sow crops to B's land. The crops are growing at a time of eviction. A is entitled to whole of the crops.